Hey up guys, in a previous lesson I talked about how I came to understand where chords come from, and in that video I showed you the structure of the major triad, the minor triad. I also got into the diminished and the augmented triads as well, and how their spacings are created. What I'm going to do first is I'm just going to run through the key of C major here. So first things first, I'm going to do this in two formats, in letters, but I'm also going to do it in standard notation. It's been a request that's happened that people who play piano want to understand how this works with standard notation as well. This is two ways of understanding the same information. So we have a treble clef here, and like I said, this is going to be in the key of C major. Now, the triad that we're first going to map out here is the first chord or the first triad in the key of C major there. So you can see we've got the root, the third and the fifth. If you can read music, then you're going to know what these notes are. This is a C, this is an E, and this is a G. But we can also understand this by looking at it from the perspective of it just being letters. So there we go, we've got a C, an E and a G, and this is linked to this up here. So we can think of this as being one and the same thing. Now, the distance between each of these letters is what's called an interval. And what I showed you in that other video was that this was thirds that make these gaps up in between these intervals. I'm not going to get massively into that, but I'm going to explain this because the idea is I take these triads, and these triads are in what's called root position. So they are not inversions. We are going to get to inversions and how to understand inversions. And I'm going to show you quite a few different ways that we notate inversions in different styles of music, so you get a good overall understanding. So here we've got the C major, and basically if we see this structure, and it's interesting to see how this works out. This is the C note, this is the tonic of the key. So I'm just going to colour that in to show you that that is the tonic. So we've got the tonic, and then I'm going to do the scale degrees of the C major scale. So the scale degrees go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then we get to C again. That's really just a repeat of that note there, but this is a good way of just plotting this out. So this is a D note here. Now, if you've seen my other videos before, I do this thing that I call the cycle of thirds. What I do is I start on one of the notes. So if I went here, C, E, G, B, D, F, and A there. I've done it in a circle so that we can jump from one note to the next, and we can see how these intervals form between these notes here. So C, E, G, B, D, F, A, C. These are exactly the same notes as we have in our C major scale, only we have arranged them by jumping over. If you imagine C, there would be a D in the middle, and then it would be E. There will be an F there, then we get a G, then we get an A there, a B, a C, a D, an E, an F, a G, an A. I'm not going to write those in because I don't want to muddy up the pattern, but it goes around like this. Now, each of these here is the root note for a chord. So this is how this tertian movement thing works. And like I say, watch that other video. I'll link it in the video description below if you haven't seen that. And I'll also put it in a card just up here. Now, one of the things that people wanted to know was the distance between these. People got a bit confused thinking that it was all major thirds, it was all minor thirds, but it isn't. It's a mixture of thirds because this is the way that it all works with stacking up these thirds to make triads. So we've got here in between C and E, I'm going to use this symbol. I know it means major 7, but I'm using it as shorthand really just to say that the distance between that C and E there is going to be a major third. If we go from the E to the G, that's a minor third. G to a B is a major third. B to a D is a minor third. D to an F is a minor third. F to an A is a major third. A to a C is a minor third. That's just gonna help us to understand what's going on here, and you'll be able to see these intervals a little bit clearer. So let me just flesh out this C major, and then once you understand how these triads work, then what I'll do is I'll get into changing those root position triads into inversions. So the beautiful thing I think about the standard notation is if it's in a space or on a line, then basically it just follows up. So you see that's in a space, this is going to be in a space, and this is going to be in a space. So they group lovely in there like that. Now what we end up with here is a D, an F, and an A, and we can see that here in this cycle of thirds thing, D, F, and A. So we can name the notes there. That's a useful way to name the notes. If you only knew that note and you wanted to know what those two notes were there, then what you might do is you go D, F, A. You'd use that cycle of thirds mnemonic. And in fact, this cycle of thirds mnemonic can take you into the 7th, into the 9th, into the 11th, and into the 13th chord, which is what I call the full chord. Now let's carry on, and you'll see how these alternate between being on lines, spaces, line, space, line, space, line, space. We've got D, F, and A there. So as well as having it written out in standard notation here, this might be confusing, this might be a challenge and a barrier to you understanding this. But if we look at this here, these are the letters that we use to write our name, etc. So this is applying to this. And when I've got these here, what I'm thinking is we've got the root, a third, and we have a fifth. Now the third is changeable, whether the tonality of the chord is major or minor. So there's the root, that's the third, that's the fifth. And if you imagine it's just like rows and columns in an Excel spreadsheet, you could do that as an exercise. So that's going to be the root of this chord, that's going to be the third of this chord, and that's going to be the fifth of this chord. I'll circle back to these because what we want to do is define the tonalities of these, but let me just fill these out. So you can see, just following the pattern, this is an E here, and then if we go E, G, B, does that tally with my cycle thirds? E, G, B, yes it does. Okay, wonderful. F, A, C, so look, F, A, C, yeah, that tallies. Okay, let's do this. G, B, D, G, B, D, wonderful. A, C, and then E. I know how to read these notes, but if you don't, you can rely on these letters, and I'll explain this one by one as I go through them. You see B, D, and F there. B, D, and F. Wonderful. And like I said, this is a repeat of that. I just wanted to make sure I established that full major scale there. So there's the major scale. If you look at the bottom notes here, that's Do, Re, Mi, Fa, So, La, Ti, Do. So do, do. You've gone all the way through there. But this one here, this is the tonic because that is your key. So let's go back to this one and let's fill these all out. So you can see here that we're on the E. And this makes sense because you can see that the musical alphabet is forming its way out here. So we've got a C, a D, and then the next one's going to be an E. So we go E, G, B, or we can refer here, we can go E, G, B. We just borrow from that cycle of thirds there, E, G, and a B. I'm putting these brackets here to show you that there's some kind of interval going on between those, and I'm going to label that in a moment. And like I say, using this cycle of thirds, I'm going to use this to say that this is a major third. I'm going to use this minus sign to show that it is a minor third. Okay, so major third, minor third. Let's look at this one. This is going to be an F note. So we start on the F. Let's go around, use the cycle of thirds there. F, A, C. If you can read music, you know that's F, A, C. So it's clarifying it in two ways. So F, A, C. Wonderful. Next one, we've got a G here. Hopefully, you may even notice I said that C, D, E, F, G. That's the end of the musical alphabet. So that's something I've got to be aware of. I go G, B, and D. Let's just clarify it. G, B, D. Yep, we're all good. We've got that there. So there's that interval and there's that interval, which we're coming back to. Don't worry, guys. We've got to the end of the musical alphabet. And then what we've got to do is we've got to go back to the beginning. And you can see that this is an A here, which is the beginning of the musical alphabet. So we've got A. Let's look at the cycle of thirds. A, C, E. A, C, E. Superb. We have it. Let's fire through this. And then the last one we have here is B, D, F. That makes sense because end of the musical alphabet, what comes after that? It's going to be A, so then it's going to be B. And then you can see what would come next would be C again. So really we're just going to go all the way back round again. So you can see you get 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 distinct triads that we form out of this. We can think of these triads as being chords as well. It's the same thing, essentially. You can see it's a lovely little way of understanding it. And that's how we come to work out the triads that become the chords from the parent major scale. Now, the thing is, if I want these to be triads that I can use on guitar or piano and understand them, then I need to be able to name these. And how I do this is I need to understand the tonality next. And the tonality is whether it is major or minor. There are other tonalities as well we can think of, but for now we're just thinking of these majors and minors. We'll come back to this one here because this will introduce another tonality that we need to understand. Now, the thing that we can do is we can cheat and we can look at the cycle of thirds, and we can look at the distance between the root and the third and pick up on the kind of third that it is, and that tells us whether the chord is major or minor. So this distance between the C and the E here is major, so that tells me that the chord is going to be C major. There you go, so C is there. Now if I go from the D to the F on this next chord here, you can see that I've got this minus that tells me it's a minor third, which means I retain this root note of D, but then I have to add this little M, which means minor. So that tells me I'm going to play a C major chord, then a D minor chord. And if you read music, then you'll already know that this D, F, A, this is the notation for a D minor chord. Like I said, this one has got the root third and fifth there, but this has got a root, a minor third and a fifth there. So let's look at this E. We're going to take that as the root note for the chord now. So these here, these are the root notes for the chords that we're figuring out from here. So there's the E. Let's have a look. E to G, we can use that. It's going to be a minor there. So I need to put that little M on it there. This one, F to A. Let's just cheat for speed here. F to A, that's major. So let's call it F. We don't need to add anything else to it. Don't need to write major or any of that stuff. And you can see F, A, C. That's how you write F major as a triad in standard notation. Let's do it here. G, B. Let's have a look. G to B. You can see we've got that major triangle there. So that's telling us it's a G. We've got a G there, guys. Let's look at this. A to C. A to C, we can see we've got the minor symbol, which means minor third. So that's going to be a root note of A, but we need to turn it to be a minor chord. Now, something I haven't said so far is if we look at the D minor chord, for instance, we can see that we get D, F, A. If I go there, I go D, that's telling me that it's minor, that distance between the D and the F there. But if we look from the third to the fifth of the triad, then you can see it switches to be major. And if I just write those in here, you'll start to see C to E, that's a major third. E to G, that's a minor third, which I think is really interesting once we start getting into these others. The D minor here, F to the A, we get a major. So they flip around. We get a major third and a minor third in every triad, but they flip over depending on which tonality it is. So from E to G, remember it's an E minor there, that's going to be minor, and you can guess that we're going to get a major third there. And it all tallies here, you can see it. F to A, that's a major third. A to C is a minor third. Okay, G to B is a major third. B to D is a minor third. A to C is a minor third. C to E is a major third. And then here we hit a problem, which is why I haven't written it out yet, because we need to go over here and we can observe it. We go B, D, F. You can see that we've got a minor third in the beginning part of this, but when we want to add up to that 5 there to see what that fifth is, really for this to be a perfect fifth, for it to be just like the other chords that we have here, then that needs to be an F sharp, and it isn't, because what's happened is it's been flattened, and when we flatten something it becomes diminished, and this is the symbol for it. We'd use this little symbol here, diminished. So we're going to write that there, because the distance between the D and the F, we can see that we get 2 minor thirds. So there's 2 minor thirds. So this is the odd one out. This is the wobbly bob chord. That's why I call it the wobbly bob chord. So that is the diminished chord. So you can see here that what happens as a net result is we have 3 major chords, 3 minor chords, and we have wobbly bob at the end there, and that's always going to be the case. Now what I can also do with this is explain this in Roman numerals. Right, now this is the most important chord here, and this is recapping a lot of the other stuff that I did. If we've got an uppercase 1 there, then that denotes a major tonality. Generally in my mind it means it's got a major third, and if we have this lowercase version of a 1, that's telling me it's minor. Now this is going to come in again when we get into these inversions. So here, this is going to be chord 1. We've already established that this is minor, so what we would do is we would use lowercase Roman numeral spelling for that one. This is the third chord along, so that's the first chord, and it's just like it looks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, exactly like that, but we're just doing it in Roman numerals. There's 3. This is going to be 4. Now because it's major, I have to put the serifs on top and on the bottom of the character there, so this is a G, and then I've got this A minor, and then I've got this B diminished. Now this is an odd one, I think, because it's got this minor third going from the root to the minor third. So what we do is we use that to help us to spell it in lowercase, and then we put that diminished symbol on to make sure that you don't think that that's a minor triad. That diminished symbol there is telling you that you've got this flattened fifth here, this diminished fifth, because that's the distance between the B and the F. It's a strange one. I've done lots of stuff on my channel about this. Now once we understand these chords here that I've given you, these triads here, these have all been in root position. These are all in root position, and this isn't the only way to play these chords. So let's take this information now. I'll just keep on referring back to this sheet, and we will look at how we take a triad and we turn it into inversions. Okay, so now we have a clean sheet of paper here, and I'm going to write out this C major here again. I'm going to use this chord 1 here as the example for how we would come across inversions in playing and learning music. Okay, so that's a C, E, G there. Okay, so there is our triad, and that's a C major. I'll just put C above it there like that. Now, I could take that idea that I've got the C there, and remember I spelt it out before with this business here. So I've got C, E, and I have a G there. If you remember, we had the major third and we had the minor third, and that was the distance between those. Now this is really important because when you think about a root position triad, which is what these are, they sound very solid, very stable, very complete. They sound like home, and that's what root position chords do. When we get into inversions, inversions introduce new intervals between the notes, and we're still using the same notes, but when we move them around, what happens is we introduce other intervals, and those intervals create a different feeling. And I tend to think that inversions give us a much warmer sound. I think they're very kind of cozy sounding chords, if that even makes sense, that a chord could be cozy. But it's definitely not as stark as, say, a root position major triad. Those sound very, very solid, but there's a bit of warmth, I think, to inversions, and this is why we want to be able to use them, because essentially it's how we colour our chords that creates the feeling and the emotion that we want to invoke in the listener. Hopefully that makes sense. So here we have the root position chord here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add something that you might come across. And in standard notation, the close chord, sometimes what's given, well, actually I'll do this over here. You might get given this note here, and it might say 3 and then 5 like that underneath it. So it just gives you your starting root note, and then it says 3, 5 underneath it, and that's telling you that it is root position. Don't worry if this is too technical, you just need to be able to understand it, because if you can spot these and you can just memorize these little formulas here, it's giving you the root note there and telling you it's a third, fifth, so that's telling you it's a root position triad. So you may encounter that under there, and I'll just draw that under there again now, 3, 5. That's another way of understanding that chord there, okay? And I showed you this Roman numeral spelling here, uppercase Roman numeral there. I've not added anything else to it. This is the same as this, is the same as this, is the same as this, is the same as this. So if you think about it, if you know the Rosetta Stone, yeah, that's in the British Museum, it has 3 different types of text on it. It has Egyptian hieroglyphs, it has some local sort of Hebrew script, and then at the bottom it has Greek, and that's how they used it to be able to understand what was going on in hieroglyphics, okay? The Rosetta Stone. So essentially we're crossing over these different ideas here, and we're pulling that information from one to understand another layer of understanding. Hopefully this makes sense. If you're learning a song, you might look at that C and think, yeah, I know the C chord, and then you translate that into a shape that you would either play on your guitar or your piano. But sometimes when you're reading some classical music, you might come across this, and that's another way of understanding it. Right, so we're going to take these notes and we're going to arrange the order. And instead of starting on the root, which seems the most logical place to start, we're actually going to make the lowest sounding note the third. So you can see here we've got the same notes here. To take that third there. Now I'll do the same here just so that you can see what's going on. So I'm going to take that third, I'm going to put the fifth there, and then I'm going to put the root on the top. So look, there's the third, there's the fifth, and then I'm going to take that root, which was down here on the middle C point here, I'm going to put it up here in the stave, in the space. These are on the lines, and it's switched up into the space. Now what's happened is we've lost that convenient visual pattern that we had here, and now we have this disruption where it goes from being on a line to being in a space, and that's a widening of that gap. What's happened is we retained this root and third. Remember the distances here. You can see this E to G, that's a minor third. But what happens is we get another interval when we go from the G to the C. We are introducing another interval because all we've had really so far is the third and the fifth. We have thirds, major thirds and minor thirds, but we also have this fifth. Well, this has introduced a new interval. So we've got that third, we've got a fifth there. So going from the third here and then up to the C, what happens is we get a sixth. So I'll just put that there as a sixth. But you can see that we've already retained this third here as well. So this becomes what's known as a 3/6. So we move away from having this third and fifth to having this distance here. That's a third and that's a sixth, okay? Now, it changes how we would experience this as a Roman numeral, and this would give us a different way of spelling it to say that this is a first inversion, because this is the first one we're doing. We're taking that third, we're making that the lowest sounding note, and then by putting that note higher, it creates just a different distance. Another way that we're going to encounter this is as slash chords. There's lots of slash chords that you're going to come across. If you play a piano, if you play a C major and you put a B in the bass, then something else is going to be going on there. Chances are you're going to be playing a slash chord. And this is the most common way of understanding slash chords. Most slash chords are going to be inversions. And the way it might be written in Roman numeral is to call this, it's not a flat, it's a B. Yeah, so that's a letter B. So that would be the first inversion. So this is root position, and this is going to be first inversion. Now, when we do this first inversion, we still keep the name of the original chord, and just to show you where this slash chord idea comes from, that's the slash. And the E being the lowest note, what we have to do is put that after the slash there. And I tend to think of it as being triad and then bass note. So you can think of it as chord, bass. So that would be what you would see for the first inversion C major triad. Now, that's the first inversion. There is a second inversion. Now what we're going to do, instead of starting on the third, which we did for the first inversion, we're going to start on the fifth. And you can see there's the third, there's the fifth, there's the root. They're all in a different order. So I'm going to start on the fifth. I'm going to keep that root note there. And there's my C. And then I know that my E goes up here an octave. And because that E has moved up, then you can see we'll start to get back into that familiar pattern where the notes are in the correct order in those spaces. In fact, if I carried on and I took that note up again, it would mean that the G would be above again. That would be a triad an octave higher. But we're not talking about that today. What we're looking at is this business here. So if we look at the distance between the G and the C here, then that gives us another interval. It brings another interval into play. We've already introduced a sixth, okay? So we've got this sixth here. So we've got that 3 there, we've got 3 there, we've got 6 there, we've got 3, we've got a 5 there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to introduce an inverted fifth, if we want to think about it in that way. And this is why inverting intervals is super useful to know. What happens is we introduce a fourth. And then this interval here, well, look, it isn't falling in the lines and spaces. So what happens is we get a sixth again. And then the spelling for that would be 4, 6. This is generally used in cadence. This is called a cadential 6/4, but that's beyond the remit of this lesson. Now, this means, remember, this is the root, this is the third, this is the fifth. So that means we're going to start down here. This is G. We jump up to a C, and then we've got an E there. Look at the notes here, guys. There's no new notes added to this to create these structures. So the G to the C, the distance for that is a fourth, and then from the G up there to the E, that is still a 6. So we get this 6/4. Now, how does that affect the Roman numeral spelling? Well, here, we get the 1, the Roman numeral, and then what we'd do is we'd call it C. I've seen this called 1A, this would be 1B, and this would be 1C, but generally you don't need to add the A to that because it's known that that is the root position. Just like you don't say C major and write major after a C, you just state the root note and it is assumed that that is going to be a major. So this becomes my second inversion triad. And you're going to find that this is going to have a different way of being spelt here as a slash chord. We would take that C and then we put a slash there to show that there is another note in the bass, and in fact the lowest sound that we're starting on there is going to be a G. And this gives you essentially 3 ways to play that C chord, mix those notes up. This is extremely handy for playing piano. If you want to play chords efficiently, then really you want to be playing these inversions when you switch between, say, C's and G chords, and that just makes life easier. That's what it's all about. We want to make life easier. Now, we do get another form of inversion, but I think it was important for me to just tackle these triads first. We can invert seventh chords. Now, what's a seventh chord, Ricky? A seventh chord has a root, a third, a fifth, and some kind of seventh. And there are many varieties of seventh chord because we get major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, minor 7 flat 5, half diminished chords. We also get minor major 7 chords, and that's just to start with. There are other ways we can get 4-note chords, and I just think of them as being 4-note chords that we can do, but these are the ones that you're going to come across most, I think. Oh yeah, and get those good old diminished 7th chords in there. Can't forget the diminished 7th. So if we take this C major chord like we had in root position here, there's the C, E, G, and what we do is we add the 7th on, and look, do you see how they're all in the same group in there? They're all on the space. And in fact, this is a bit of a tangent. Remember those 7 notes that we have available in the scale? We can do the full expression of a chord. This is what I call the full chord. C, E, G, B, D, F, A. So we get the full chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes. Remember, in the cycle that I showed you, C, E, G, B, D, F, A. This would give me root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th. That's the full chord. We can express all of these chords here. All of these chords. So I just wanted to show you how that pattern lines up. Can you see? They're all on the spaces. And when I run out of spaces on the staff, I create ledger lines and I extend upwards and downwards. But for this example, what we're going to actually do is we're going to create an inverted C major 7, because this is what this chord is here. This is a C major 7 chord, and this is a 4-note chord. So we take that C major 7, we want this note to be in the bass. The easiest way we could possibly do that is by going like this. We put the triad there, like that, and then we just drop that down into a lower octave. So that would place it here. Okay, that would be a good way of understanding it. And essentially with this one here, like I say, C, E, G, B, that's the spelling for that C major 7. We've got the C, E, G. So we just take that B there and we just drop it in the bass. So we're dropping it down there. I could play that like that, put it as a slash. I could even think of it as a slash chord, C/B. It's a bit of an odd way of doing it, but it's still a good way of understanding how that works. And sometimes it's easier to see chords in that manner. If I was looking at this would be basically a 3rd inversion. Now there's special use cases for this, so I won't get into the Roman numeral value of this, because what we were doing was we were starting with understanding how to get inversions from triads, just thought I'd add this in here to show you that it can go up to third inversion. And in fact, that's where inversions finish, guys. So if it was a C with a different note other than an E, G, B, anything that can be contained within that major 7, then that might be something a little bit different, and it's just probably a borrowed note from another key or something, just to create some chromaticism or some tension or something like that. But hopefully you can see that that is cut there. So there's the C triad, and then we've got the B in the bass there, and that gives us our third inversion. So inversions aren't anything to be scared of, guys. You've just got to work through this stuff and just come to understand it. And it's really easy. If you wanted to, you know, just play a C triad, put an E in the bass to get the sound. You've got to listen to them and understand how they work. We also get a C to a G here. If we played a C and then we played a G in the bass, you would hear that richness and you could actually see the gap. But the thing is, to get away from this, guys, is it's about these interval gaps between the notes. When we look at these intervals, when we switch them around, we generally start with triads. It's all about thirds and fifths. But when we get into inversions, we start introducing this fourth and the sixth. So that gives us 4 intervals that we can tap into, these different textures that create different colours to the chords. Now, if this is something you're interested in, you can explore it further, because if we think about triads, there are more than just major and minor triads, okay? Those are the most important ones that we need to learn, major and minor triads. But we also have augmented, diminished, we also have suspended triads as well. So we can do things with these, and we can see that little structures happen, and it's very interesting, but it gives you a better understanding. And then when you look at the score on some manuscripts and you start to see these gaps and how these disruptions happen on the standard notation, then that'll give you a better idea of what's happening to the triads, because everything is basically about these and how they're organized. Right, guys, if that's something you want to get into, drop a comment on the video. And if you haven't seen the original video I did about this, then I'll just drop it on here so that you can watch that now.